What's going on everyone, Mike here, and this is the Asus ZenBook UX301 LA, or the so-called ZenBook Infinity, Asus's top-of-the-line Ultrabook available right now. It combines a sleek body made from glass and metal with a high-resolution touchscreen and a powerful Intel Haswell hardware platform, but you'll find a lot more about this laptop by watching the review, so let's get started. With the ZenBook Infinity, Asus tries to get ahead of its competitor in a segment filled with beautiful and fast machines. For that, they changed the overall aspect from the previous ZenBooks in order to make a better first impression with this new entry. As a result, glass covers the lid, and that's no ordinary glass but Gorilla Glass 3, which should make the surface scratch-proof. On the other hand, smudges and fingerprints are part of the menu with this finishing, especially on the navy blue version that we have here. This won't show as easily on the white model though. Regardless, the ZenBook looks awesome on this dark blue color, which is used not only for the lid but for everything else, including the interior, the keyboard and the underbelly. Speaking about the interior, you should know that some sort of ceramic coated glass covers the palm rest and the area around the keys, while the frame, the sides and the bottom are made from solid pieces of metal. As a result, the lower body of this laptop feels very solid, while the lid still flexes to some extent when pressed. But overall, this is a fairly sturdy machine. It's well balanced too, as you can easily grab the screen with one hand and lift it while the body stays in place. In fact, the upper part of the laptop is millimetrically longer than the body below, so you can easily lift up the screen. The two-side hinge is identical to the one we've seen on the ZenBook UX302 and is redesigned from the older ZenBooks. But despite the narrow contact points, it's actually sturdy and can hold the screen firmly in place even when poking it. When leaning the screen on the back, the entire laptop lifts on the two small feet integrated within the rear part of the lid, leaving more space under the laptop, which translates in more air going towards the grills on the underbelly. Air is sucked through those grills and then blown out through the metallic mesh in the hinge, towards the user and towards the screen, which is not necessarily the best solution. And speaking of poor design choices, the laptop's front lip is extremely sharp and it's going to cut into your wrist when using it on a desk, despite the fairly large palm rest. Anyway, the UX301 is not the lightest 13-inch Ultrabook out there, tipping the scale at over 1.4 kilos or about 3.1 pounds. It's not the slimmest either, although it stands less than 18mm high in its thickest point, including the rubber feet, so there's nothing major to complain about here. When it comes to the ports around the sides, you'll find only two USB 3.0 slots on the ZenBook UX301, the headphone jack, the micro HDMI and the mini DisplayPort connectors. Also, the PSU is now placed on the left side of the laptop, something I for one appreciate. And there's a card reader on the right edge, which still can't properly fit an SD card, as more than half is left sticking out of the slot. Last but not least, in order to boost the connectivity options even further, Asus does offer USB to Ethernet and mini DisplayPort to VGA adapters in the pack. Anyway, let's go ahead and power on this laptop. It boots from cold in a little over 10 seconds and then resumes from sleep in about 2. And the first thing you'll notice when this one logs into Windows is the screen. Asus put a 13.3-inch IPS panel on the ZenBook UX301 with a 2560 by 1440 pixel resolution, and that makes it one of the sharpest screens available on Ultrabooks in this class right now. However, high-density panels are not a rarity these days, so luckily for Asus, the screen scores high results when it comes to brightness, contrast and color reproduction as well, as you can see from these images. In fact, this IGZO panel made by Sharp is so bright that it can be used outdoors as well, despite the glossy glass coating, a given with touchscreens. Anyway, long story short, you'll really like this display. Too bad you'll have to deal with those pesky phone scaling issues associated with Windows 8, as not all applications and interface elements scale up properly, which results in tiny text and buttons that you'll have to deal with. Hopefully that's going to be addressed with Windows 8.1. For now, let me tell you a few things about the keyboard on this laptop. I have to admit that I have never been a sucker for the keyboards Asus put on their ZenBooks, but this one is a long-awaited upgrade. Yes, the keys travel is still fairly shallow, but that aside, the feedback is good, and the keys are firm enough to register commands even when pressed on the sides or corners. The keyboard is of course backlit and sturdy, with very little flex even in the middle. The layout is fairly good as well, although the arrow keys are small and the power button is integrated within the keyboard in the top right corner, so you'll end up hitting it by mistake more often than you'd want, in which case the laptop goes to sleep without any warning message. That's annoying, but you'll get used to it in the end, or you can just disable the button from the settings. However, there's one thing I have to complain about. The space key makes a squeaking sound when pressed, something I've also encountered on the ZenBook UX302. Might not be such a big deal, but it really drove me crazy. Hear for yourselves. That aside, it's worth mentioning that there's a good trackpad on this laptop as well, with a smooth glass surface. The entire clickpad is nicely separated from the palm rest and is accurate and most of the time reliable. Support for gestures is included too, as expected. Alright, with those out of the way, let me tell you a couple of things about the goodies inside this Ultrabook, which really set it apart from its competitors. We have the top UX301 LA configuration here, with the Intel Core i7-4558U processor, 8GB of RAM, Intel Iris 5100 graphics, and a 512GB SSD. The Core i7 processor is more powerful than the Core i7-45U Haswell CPU we've seen on Ultrabooks in the last months. With a higher 28Wh TDP, the CPU runs at 2.8 GHz by default and can go up to 3.3 GHz on a single process. And the speed gains are visible both in benchmarks and while performing everyday tasks, like archiving some files or exporting a video file. The fast SSD has its role in this as well, as Asus put the 256GB SSD in RAID 0 on this laptop. As for the memory, unfortunately it is soldered on the motherboard and non-upgradable, so you can only get 8GB of RAM on this ZenBook. But choose carefully between the 4 or the 8GB options, as you're going to be stuck with what you're getting from starters. In fact, this ZenBook is not upgrade friendly. You can remove the bottom cover with the right screwdriver, but just to have a peek at the internals. Anyway, you'll find more about the hardware and plenty of benchmark results in the written review on ultrabookreview.com, so make sure to check it out. I've added the link in the description below. For now, you should know that the Asus UX301 ZenBook can easily handle everything you're going to throw at it, from browsing to multimedia content and games. Speaking of those, you get Intel Iris 5100 graphics on this laptop, and while this is still an embedded chip, it is 20 to 40% faster than the regular Intel HD 4400 chip we've seen on many other Haswell Ultrabooks, visible both in benchmarks and while gaming. Once again, head over to the review for more details about this. Okay, so we've established so far that the ZenBook UX301 is one of the most powerful 13-inch Ultrabooks available these days. But what happens when you put fast hardware in a sleek body? Well, as expected, this laptop does get hot when pushed. The area on top of the keyboard and on the underbelly around those cooling grills reach quite high temperatures, but the palm rest or the keyboard stay merely warm. As for interior temperatures, hardware monitor shows the CPU passing 90 degrees Celsius while running games. Luckily though, these high temperatures don't lead to throttling and have no direct impact over performances. As for the noise, well, the two fans inside this unit will spin fast and fairly loud, once again when pushing the laptop. When using it lightly though, they'll turn completely off, which makes the UX301 ultra silent. All those being said, there are only a few things left to talk about before drawing the line here. For instance, I should mention the good connectivity options, as the UX301 does support wireless AC and Bluetooth 4.0. The included Intel 7260 wireless module is a reliable performer, although the wireless range on this laptop is only average and could have been better. Besides that, you should know that there's a webcam with dual array microphones on this Ultrabook, decent for quick hangouts and video calls. And you do get a good sound system as well, as the two speakers carved on the sides of the laptop deliver punchy and high quality audio, but only if you take some time to tweak the output with the included Audio Wizard application. Anyway, back to more important aspects, let's take a few seconds and talk about the battery life you'll be getting with this ZenBook. There's a 6-cell 50Wh battery on this laptop, and with average use, that includes browsing, editing documents, listening to some music and watching some clips, with the screen at about 50% and Wi-Fi on, that's enough to keep it running for about 6 to 7 hours. If you use it lightly and dim the screen even more, you could easily get 8+ hours of life on a charge. But on the other hand, while running games, the UX301 will run out of juice much quicker. Anyway, you'll find more about that in the written review on ultrabookreview.com. Okay, so wrapping up this review, there are for sure many things you will like about this Ultrabook, like the sleek body, the awesome screen, the good keyboard and trackpad. However, you do get most of this slightly better or worse on other good Ultrabooks available these days, like the Acer Aspire S7, the Sony Vaio Pro, the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro or the Samsung ActiveBook 9 Plus. On the ZenBook UX301, there's the more powerful hardware option available on this top configuration. But is it worth paying around $2,200 or over 2,000 euros for it? Well, that's up to you to decide. On the other hand, the cheapest Asus UX301 starts at about 1,300 euros over here with a Full HD screen, a Core i5 processor, 4GB of RAM and the 128GB SSD, which is not cheap but is on par with the prices Acer, Samsung, Lenovo or the others are asking for their similar Ultrabooks. And that makes the Asus ZenBook UX301 an option you have to consider if you're after a premium 13-inch Haswell laptop. But is it better than all the others? Well, you'll find the answer to that question in the many comparisons that will be posted on the site in the next days, so make sure to check them out. Anyway, that's about it for now, but I'd love to know what you guys think about this Asus ZenBook UX301, so leave your replies below. And as always, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to share it around, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. I'll catch you soon in the next video.